Yeah, I thought it was superb. Best Bond film in a long time. Best Daniel Craig film. Really good.
Hi, I'm Heidi Lux with the TUNDRA Enthusiast Network, and I'm here with David Black, the chairman of the International James Bond Fan Club.
Hi, how are we doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's probably a bit colder over here in the UK than where you are. But
For sure, it's 80 degrees in LA.
yeah.
Are you excited for the new James Bond movie to come out?
Well, I've already seen it actually, so I'm ahead of the queue. I went with all the cast and crew on Tuesday to the premiere, and I got to see it, and yeah, it was a good night. Took my daughter; she was very excited to be there.
That's amazing. So what can we expect? No spoilers, but what can we expect from the new?
Well, yeah, I think it's probably one of the best Bond films we've had in years, and it's probably one of the best Bond films ever. And I'm not exaggerating. I know you'll think I'm just saying that to push the film, but it really is excellent. And it's just got a really good mix of action, drama, humor, all the bits people like, the cars, explosions, chases, romance. There were people crying in it. I mean, honestly, it was just really good. So as soon as it's out, get it seen.
What would you say makes it so much better than the other Bond movies? Because there's been some pretty great Bond movies. Like, I don't know if we can top A Volcano Lair, like in You Only Live Twice.
Yeah. I mean, they've evolved over the years, and you're right, there have been superb films and they've built great sets and great things. And every producer that comes along is always trying to outdo the one before. And again, this time, I think they know what people want more and more. Yeah, it's not. I love all the films. I'm a bit weird, so it's hard for me to say, and I love all of them. But it really has all the right ingredients, good sets. And I think the other thing is, they did a great job back in the 60s and the 70s, but the technology now has moved on, hasn't it? And they can do things that you could only dream of. And you look at the screen and think, how did they do that? You know, have they really done that? Is it? And you can't tell sometimes if it's real or if it isn't. So, but it just, yeah, just a great film. You'll love it, you know. I would just say, I think that they brought Daniel Craig in actually, because if you think back to Die Another Day, Pierce Brosnan, yeah, and he was good as Bond. But once they started having invisible cars and some of those scenes, I think there's a bit of an outcry. People said, yeah, it's little bit fake, isn't it? And then they wanted to go back to a bit more reality, if we can call it reality.
I have to say, I loved the invisible car. I loved the ice hotel. I think that's classic camp Bond. There's something about James Bond that's appealing, that's campy, but then there's like the action part, which is exciting. Well, what would you say? What do you think that people respond to most with James Bond?
Well, I think everyone has their own little piece they like, but I think we've had all this time with COVID and all the other problems in the world, and people are just pleased to get back and have a bit of escapism and get a bit of entertainment. And what's better than a bit of James Bond to get you going? The guys, they all sort of want to be James Bond, and they want the cars, and they like all the shooting and explosions. And I think the girls all look at it and think, yeah, if I could just go and sit next to him in that car and ride around with him, that would be great. And everyone has their own little bit, don't they, that they like. And yeah, I just think it's good. And people always say to me, has he not had his day? Has he not had his day? But everyone still goes to see it, so they must like something in it. So
yeah, that's true. I think there's now an issue with James Bond in a post-Me Too landscape. Like, do you think that James Bond is like, clearly he's been evolving throughout the past five decades. We've not had he's not stayed as Sean Connery level James Bond, but what place do you think James Bond has in the future? Like, how will he evolve in the future?
Or will he evolve? But yes, we were talking about this earlier today, actually, and a lady I was talking to was saying, yeah, she just watched some of the early Sean Connery movies, like Goldfinger, and he was there pushing Pussy Galore around, and almost like a rape scene. You know, it's almost like overpowering. And you look back and think, God, you just would not get away with that today. It's just unacceptable. So it has changed, hasn't it? And
yeah, I mean, you know, we never saw Pierce Brosnan do that. We never saw Timothy Dalton do that. We never saw Daniel Craig do that. So it's interesting that some people still think that James Bond has been acting the same way throughout all the decades when that's not.
Yeah. And he has, you're right, he's changed. Things have moved on. And where it goes from here, who knows? I mean, Daniel has been a good James Bond. He's rejuvenated the series and he's brought a new audience to it, the younger generation. I think they need to find someone younger, but then you get into all this debate of, do they have a black James Bond? Do they have a female James Bond? They were asking earlier, did they have a gay James Bond? Who knows? Who knows where it goes? Right. Yeah, I think he's got a future. That's all I would say, because it would be a brave person to not carry on with James Bond. You know, I mean, let's face it, it makes so much money for the people concerned. Why would you not make another? You'd be mad, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's very true.
And if the new film had come out and no one went to see it, fair enough, they might think twice. But we already know it. Certainly in the UK, last night and tonight, they're all booked up completely, and there are screenings every 30 minutes, and they can't fill them fast enough.
I know that James Bond is he's very British. Like, what role does he play in the British identity?
I think the British like to have James Bond. I don't think any of us we don't really go around in dinner jackets all day, and we don't all drive Aston Martins all day. Well, not most of the time. But yeah, we like James Bond, you know, but I don't think we're obsessed by him. You know, Britain, we haven't got many, well, we've a few things left to export, I suppose. We've got a bit of good rock music, but James Bond is one, and the royal family, you know, they're some of our things we like to.
So what first attracted you to James Bond? What was your interest in him?
Well, I think like a lot of British young boys, we just see the films when we're younger. And when I was at school, we had one Christmas. Every Christmas we'd have it was a tradition of a school movie, and a guy would come and bring a big screen and set all his big projector up. In whatever year it was, 74 or 5, a couple of years after it was released, they turned up and they showed us Live and Let Die with Roger Moore on the big screen at school. And I can't remember how old I was. I might have been 8 or 10 or whatever I was. And I watched this and I thought, God, that's just amazing. I love that. Whoa, got to have more of that. And that just, then as I grew up, I started to watch them and watch the earlier ones and grew up watching them and looking forward to new films coming out. And as they came out, watch them. And as I grew older, I started collecting posters and film posters, not too obsessively, but I did have a lot. And that's how I got to be doing the thing I do now, which again, I'm an author, but I am the chairman of the fan club. But that was an accident. I was trying to do a deal to buy some more posters off someone, and they said, oh, have you met this person? We're looking for a new person to do the fan club. And that was about 20 years ago. And I just said, well, I sort of went to London and came back one day, and my wife said, why have you got a silly look on your face? And I said, oh, I've just bought a fan club, or I've sort of taken over a fan club. She thought I'd gone mad. Anyway, so there we are.
What's your favorite piece of James Bond memorabilia that you have?
Well, I've had a lot of posters, some of them quite value from the early days, but I have acquired things over the years. And where I live for quite a long time, we looked after, I don't know if you know, or you probably do, you're a Bond fan, aren't you? The Diamonds Are Forever movie with Sean Connery in 1971. He goes to Las Vegas and he ends up stealing a moon buggy on a film set, and driving it across the desert. Well, that moon buggy ended up in my backyard for about 5 years. So that's probably the biggest piece of memorabilia I had at one point.
That's amazing. So how did that moon buggy end up in your backyard?
Well, that's my predecessor had been trying to find it because it disappeared after the movie and no one knew where it was. So in about 10 years after the movie, he located it in a backyard behind a farm, an old farm somewhere not far from Pinewood Studios where they'd made it. And he found it. It was a bit grubby and needed a bit of cleaning up. So he rescued it and they tidied it up and cleaned it up and it got back to looking how it should. And then it got shipped. Ironically, it had been in Pinewood. It got shipped to Las Vegas and it went to the Planet Hollywood diner in Las Vegas. And it stood in that diner for 10 years. And then I think they were trying to do a deal. They wanted to buy it. It was on lease to them from over here, from someone in our club. And then they didn't want to pay the money for it, so they refused to pay it. So they took the wall down at the Planet Hollywood, and they took the wall down and had to brick it all back up again to get this thing out, put it in a shipping container, sent it to the UK. They said, "Oh, we've nowhere to put it." I said, "Oh, well, I've plenty of room." So they stuck it in my shed, and it stood there for 5 years. And we moved it round and sit in it and take pictures of ourselves looking like idiots in it and think Sean Connery sat in this. And then eventually it was put up for auction, and it was bought by Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas, who then put it back in a shipping container and sent it back to Las Vegas. And it now hangs in, I think it's in the Planet Hollywood Casino, hanging from the roof. So if you want to see it, that's where it is today. So it's a strange, you know.
That's wild. I think that's every James Bond fan's dream, is to own one of just something that Sean Connery touched or looked at or was like aware of its existence.
Well,
amazing.
Yeah, the original car, the DB5 from the movie, there were 2 or 3, I think, at the time. There were a couple in the movie Goldfinger, and then there was another one that was built just for going around all the cinemas just when they were releasing the film. So it had all the gadgets on. That one's still around. One of the others, I think, got written off. But the original real one disappeared, actually. It got stolen somewhere in America maybe in the late 90s. But in the last few weeks, there are rumors that they think they found it now in some, I shouldn't say it, but in some Arabian multi-billionaire's private collection. It seems there's rumors that it's going to reappear, so that would be interesting.
So what's your favorite James Bond car?
Well, yeah, I like quite a few of them, in fairness. And our family, my brother actually owned a replica of the DB5. So he had one exactly the same. So we had that for quite a number of years. So I did drive around in that quite often. He sold it last year. The trouble is, they do break down a lot. Now, you don't see that in the film. They're never in an escape, are they, having to call for the roadside rescue? They tend to work fine. But in reality, they are quite old and they do go wrong a bit. So, but the DB5 is the classic Bond car, which I love. But I like all the Aston Martins, really. I even like all the Lotuses that Roger Moore had.
What's your favorite James Bond gadget?
Yeah, gadgets. Well, they've had all sorts of odd things, haven't they? I suppose I quite like just the simple things, you know, the magnetic watches where he can twiddle the dial and release a lady's dress or whatever he does with it. So I quite like that sort of stuff. Some of them get a little bit far-fetched, don't they? But I mean, the car in itself is probably the ultimate gadget in each movie. Yeah, as I say, I think you like Die Another Day. I think once they started with the invisible car, it just becomes a little bit hard to believe. That's all. I think.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to defend the invisible car.
You like that, don't you?
The villain in his face, the lasers. But that movie came out when I was years old, and it was part of my childhood. And I think that you lock into, no matter how terrible the James Bond movie is, if it was in your childhood, like that's, you lock onto it, and that's your favorite.
I think people do. They grow up with their own set of films. I suppose I grew up with all the Roger Moore films. I still like Sean Connery. He's my favorite Bond, but I have a sort of special place in my heart because those Bond films of the late 70s and the early 80s, you're right, I grew up with them and they sort of mean something to me. So I loved all that. I loved the Lotuses and the underwater cars. And I like the Timothy Dalton. He was the first one. Of course, the Aston Martins were in the Sean Connery films and the George Lazenby film in 1969. But then there's a sort of gap then. Roger Moore never saw an Aston Martin, the poor man. He only ever got a Lotus or an Alfa Romeo or something else. And it's not till we get back to Timothy Dalton in 87 that Aston Martin reconnected with Bond.
There was a while where James Bond was driving a lot of American cars in the 70s.
Ford Mustangs in that Diamonds Are Forever film. That was a great car, Mark I Ford Mustang. I thought, love that.
Yeah. Why do you think James Bond has lasted as long as he's lasted?
Well, I think I think they've just got a nice recipe for the films that people like, the stories and the action. And as I said a bit earlier, I think they like the fact that they wish they maybe were James Bond or maybe one of the Bond girls, or maybe they wish they were a villain. I don't know, but they keep going on. You can relate to them, and they're good to escape to and watch. It's good entertainment, and I'm not entirely sure why. They've got the formula, and just every time they bring a film out, everyone says, oh, maybe this will be the last one, but everyone goes to see it, so they make another, and maybe we'll end up, being 90 and they'll still be churning them out. I think there are times where I think they almost maybe had to try a bit too hard, or they thought they did. They were trying to beat the other Hollywood movies. And then someone has come back in and said, actually, we don't need to try as hard as that because we're managing on our own. Let's just do our own thing. Do we need to have more explosions than Arnold Schwarzenegger's got in his latest film? Or do we need more guns than this film? No, just do your own thing. People like it how it is. And that's it. Just keep the bits people like.
How do you think that James Bond differs from other spies, like other movies in the espionage genre?
Well, you just mentioned there, like the Bourne series. And they're great. They're great films. And they're just different, aren't they? I just think we still like to have a bit of Britishness about James Bond and little quips, little one-liners that he drops in, and you won't be disappointed. The new film's got a bit of that in it, and a little bit of humour, a little dry sense of humour, and don't take it too seriously. People do say, oh, it's getting a bit silly. He wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that. It's a film, he can do what he likes, can't he, really? But going back to the invisible car again, I suppose if he wants an invisible car, he can have one. But I just think you've got to take it with a pinch of salt, as we would say. It's just meant to be entertainment. But yeah, is he different? He always wins in the end, but he does get hurt a bit along the way, And I think he's slightly vulnerable, and likable at the same time. And he does. When he's taking on one of these villains and does something to them, we're sitting there thinking, go on, give it to him. We know that's exactly what we want to see before it almost happens. So.
What's your wildest James Bond story in relation to the fan club?
Wildest story. I've been lucky enough to meet. I've never actually met a James Bond, I have to admit. I've sort of been in the same buildings. I've been in the same room as them, but never actually managed to meet them. I've met quite a few of the Bond girls from yesteryear. I've met them from Goldfinger, Shirley Eaton and Caroline Munro, and various ones over the years. I'll tell you an odd little story, though, was I used to run an event business, and I used to deliver chairs to people's events for parties and weddings and things like that. You know, I'll sort of do normal things in the background. And I do remember one day I was delivering some chairs, and I was driving a truck, and I'd parked this truck up at a hotel, and I was there wheeling chairs into this hotel, just like a typical workman. And my phone rang, and I was standing in the back of a truck. And on the phone, it was Richard Keel, who was Jaws in the Spy Who Loved Me films and the Moonraker film with Roger Moore. And I had a 10-minute chat with Richard Keel, Jaws, on this phone about the movie and about something else. He'd rung me because he was in one of our magazines we'd done. So I still had a day job, so to speak. But I was standing in the back of this truck just thinking, no one would believe, would they, if I said to them, who are you talking to now? Can you get on with your work? And I said, just a minute, I'm on the phone just talking to him. You know, it was just bizarre, really. It was just an odd thing to happen, you know, that springs to mind. Going back to the cars, I've had a few times. I've had a sit in a few of them just by accident, by being there. So the Die Another Day, again, he had the very disappearing car I keep going on about. I did have a sit in one of those. There's always more cars than people realize with these things. I've been on the set and seen how many cars they get through, which is sometimes a bit alarming. So.
And then they also go through outfits too. I think in Skyfall, for the opening sequence, Daniel Craig had like 30 suits just to play one suit in the movie.
Yeah, I think when they're earning as much money as they earn, none of these things matter, do they? It would shock us, but they do. They get through equipment and cars and suits and sets. I suppose if you're spending $250 million to make the film, it sort of doesn't matter, does it?
Right.
Yeah. You see, that's the funny thing. Daniel Craig was there, wasn't he, with saying he didn't want to do it again last time, and they were saying, and they ended up paying him $100 million to do this one, I believe. I thought I'd happily jump in and do it. I'd do it for 10 million. But this new film as well, I will tell you that they obviously still have a tie-in with Aston Martin, and there's a few of them, and the Land Rovers that they have in there. And believe how many of those there must, even in the film, how many get destroyed is quite frightening.
It must be so painful to watch for a car lover to just see this beautiful piece of engineering completely destroyed.
Yeah, it's like Daniel in the was it Casino Royale, where the Vespa was on the road tied up and he had to swerve and rolled the car however many times. It's a world record for the number of rolls the car made, and you just sitting watching that car thinking, oh, what you'd give to have that car, and they've just destroyed it. But yeah, that's what makes the films, isn't it? So, and Daniel Craig's, well, he's a month different to me, so I know he's 53 years old now. So he'd be, so he's 53. He started at 38, which was right, but already 53. He's heading. Let's not joke. He's heading, like me, to be a pensioner soon. They need to find someone who can have a run of 10 or 15 years. They need someone of 35, that sort of age, don't they? I think, to take it on.
For sure. Who would you think would be a great James Bond? My pick would be Matt Berry, even though I think he was awful, but I would love to see him as James Bond. Who would you pick?
Who would I pick? I don't know. Over here in England, they seem to like Tom Hardy. They think he would be good. He was in, you see him in all sorts of things. Every time people choose a name, they look at all the people they know and they go, how about him? They'll actually choose, I think, someone we've not thought of, like they did with Timothy Dalton. Even Daniel Craig. No one really thought of Daniel Craig. They named all the big things, big named stars. And then in the end, Eon came and picked someone from the background. I think they like someone. They don't want you to look at them and think of them. For example, if you tried to pick someone like, let's say someone ridiculous, like Sylvester Stallone to be Bond, you couldn't get him being Rocky out of your mind. So it wouldn't really work. You'd always see him as Rocky. They want someone that we don't really know, that they can mold into being Bond. So he becomes Bond. Daniel Craig, yeah, he'd done films before. He'd done a few successful ones, but he wasn't widely known. He wasn't a big A-list name. If you get Tom Cruise in, you're going to watch Bond and think, he's not Bond, is he?
You're going to think of him as Ethan Hunt. Yeah, and even, Pierce Brosnan was known, but he was Remington Steele, which was actually based on James Bond. I
didn't realize that.
Playing James Bond, basically. Can you tell me a little bit more about the fan club? What inspired you to join it, and how large is it today?
I sort of ended up running it by accident. The days have changed. In the old days, we used to have a magazine produced every month, and they used to get magazines. With the coming of the internet, that sort of died out in the end. And so really, it's just an online community these days. And we have writers that produce articles of interest to them. So we have a website, 007.info, which people can visit, that runs alongside sort of the main sites. And there's information in there they can read about that we've put together over the years. I was never in the fan club until I sort of was running it. And it just carries on, and it's like-minded people who tend to go on the Facebook page, and they all discuss things together and give their views on the latest film and all these things.
What are some of the popular discussions now?
Well, just like we're doing, they do discuss who will be the next Bond, and will the next Bond be a woman, and what car should they have, and why did they do this, and why have they shot that car, and who's that in? They ask odd things, some of them. There are some particularly interesting characters I've come across over the years. There was a chap, actually, about a year or two ago, I came across, who had put messages on, and his wife had thrown him out the house because he'd got so much stuff and so many film things for Bond and posters and things. She moved. I think she packed his suitcase and put it on the doorstep, and she kicked him out, and he was very upset. But he was so obsessed with Bond, it was just bizarre. But we do have people who are literally a bit over the top. They literally, some of them, that I've spoken to, do go around in dinner jackets and things, and trying to think they're James Bond during the day. So
I don't blame them. I would walk around in a dinner jacket all day if I could.
Yeah, we did a bit of filming somewhere, and there was one guy turned up at. We were at the Aston Martin factory, and it was for a little bit of filming, and they wanted some Bond fans to go in with us. And one of them came up from London on the train, and he was fully dressed as Bond, and he had a Walther PPK gun in his pocket there, and he was it was under his jacket. I was amazed he didn't get arrested on the train.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a very smart idea.
Yeah. I think gun carrying in the UK is probably less, it's probably a little more common in certain areas of the US than in the UK, you just wouldn't see it normally.
How many members are in the fan club?
There's probably about 15,000 now, so they come and they go, but there's people in, I think we counted 40 countries worldwide. So we get fans in Russia and China and all sorts that join us. And so we still do the newsletters to them. So we get to see where they are. And they're literally everywhere, bottom of South Africa, middle of Africa, Canada, all over. We've got obviously a lot of US fans in our club. So
do you have any future plans for the fan club?
I don't know. I think at some point someone will take over from me, and we'll see. 15 years ago, everyone said, "Oh, it'll be finished soon," because no one will want another Bond film, and here we are, still talking about it.